time to talk about a very, very important topic, mid-round wide receivers, who to take in rounds 4, 5, 6. Once we get to 20 through 29, I'm looking at on our consensus rankings. Just realized I'm wearing my glasses. I'm going to take those off. Sorry about that. Now
I'm wearing glasses.
I get the ring light in there. It looks weird. So anyway, we are talking about the group right after. We did a whole episode on this, but you got Nico Collins, Jalen Waddle, Drake London, Brandon Ayuk, Cooper Kupp, Deebo Samuel, and some others. And then we've got another tier starting with T. Higgins at 20, all the way down to Stephon Diggs at 29. That's 10 wide receivers we're going to talk about. And when I say 20 to 29, I'm talking about, again, our PPR consensus rankings. I will compare them to our PPR average draft position on CBSSports.com. And I'll tell you guys right now, there's nobody in this group that has a wider range between his consensus ranking and his ADP than T. Higgins, the first guy. He's 20th in consensus ranking. He's 29th in ADP, and he's 28th, 29th, 30th in like 3 or 4 different websites that I looked at on ADP. So, Heath, that jumps out at me. We like T. Higgins a lot more than the world does.
And this is the thing. Like you talk about, it's this huge gap from 20th to 29th. I think I talked about T. Higgins 2 weeks ago or something when he signed his contract, and I was looking at his target share, and I thought, I'm just a little bit too low on T. Higgins' target share. I think I bumped it from 20 to 21% or 21 to 22%. And he went from wide receiver 29 to wide receiver 14 in my projections.
Oh, man.
Now, that's not
just that group is.
That's how big that group is. Like the difference between wide receiver and wide receiver 29 is nothing.
No, I didn't say that it was necessarily, but I thought that maybe there was a difference between the guys in the wide receiver, 10 to 19 range, and then this group. And you can tell me if you agree with that, but the Nico Collins, Mike Evans, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Adams, Drake London. I know you're not going to agree on every name. Who else? Michael Pittman, Chris Olave, Deebo, the 49ers guys. That group compared to 20 through 29, which is T. Higgins, DJ Moore, who we're lower on than consensus, than like everyone else. George Pickens, DK Metcalf, DeVonta Smith, Christian Kirk, Tank Dell, Calvin Ridley, Amari Cooper, and Stephon Diggs. I said a lot of names there, Dave, but
you did.
If I had to say one thing, I think that not everyone's going to fall into this category, but I think we have less upside, less non-injury upside in this group than we do in the previous group.
Sure. But I still think that there are players that you can look at and say, well, there's still upside, and you want to assign a number to it, a per game average. Call it 15, because I think if you've got a receiver that you named off that has a chance to hit 15 plus PPR points per game, you separate them. And the first name that stands out to me is DJ Moore. And the fact that last year he had a monster season as the number 1 receiver in Chicago, Justin Fields as his quarterback, huge target volume, huge target share, came through in a major way. Now there is competition for targets in Chicago. I still think he's the best receiver there. I say he got a quarterback upgrade going from Justin Fields to Caleb Williams. The one thing that holds me back from putting him even higher in my rankings is that I think that he will lose that target volume a little bit. I don't think he's catching over 90 balls like he did last year, but I think he can get to 75 plus. I still think he can score a lot of touchdowns. He's Chicago's best all-around receiver, and I'm happy to take him when he falls to that late round 3, early round 4 range, and he separates for me ahead of all the other receivers that you've named.
So first off, I should say, like, if we're talking the 10 through 19 versus the 20 through 29, T. Higgins and Calvin Ridley are both in the 10 through 19 range for me. Calvin Ridley wouldn't be in this 20 through 29 range for Dave or Jamie. He only makes it because I've inflated his ranking too much.
Push him up there.
But I don't have any trouble at all. Like, why can't Amari Cooper be at 15 fantasy points per game? Why can't Amari Cooper be a top 12 wide receiver? You look at his target volume.
He's never done it per game. He's never finished higher than 15th per game.
But I meant 15 points per game was what David said. But
sorry. But you said, why can't he be top 12? He's never finished for a full season higher than 15th per game, Amari Cooper.
Well, right. But we've got a handful of guys like actually ranked as top 12 wide receivers who have never done it. Like
Yeah.
that's not holding us back.
They're not 30 years old. They're like Garrett Wilson and Drake London. It's a fair point. And to be fair, he would have been like wide receiver 6 or something if you took out the Dorian Thompson-Robinson games. He was so good when it wasn't DTR at quarterback. But do you think that most of this group, and okay, this is a good episode to watch, by the way, youtube.com/fantasyfootball today, because we are asking you to sort of remember 10 names. Here they are: D. Higgins, DJ Moore, George Pickens, DK Metcalf, DeVonta Smith, Christian Kirk, Tank Dell, Calvin Ridley, Amari Cooper, Stephon Diggs. Similar upside or clearly less upside than Nico Collins, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Jalen Waddle, etc.
Guys who have had a season. A lot of those guys that were not in the 10 names that you listed who have had 16 plus PPR points per game. Although Diggs has, Cooper has. There are some receivers that have hit that number in this group that we're focusing on.
Like,
today.
I don't think that Nico Collins has more ups. I have Nico Collins ranked ahead of Tank Dell, and I think his projection should be slightly ahead of Tank Dell. I don't think Nico Collins has more upside than Tank Dell. I think DJ Moore has definitely shown us that he has that upside. I think George Pickens, without Deontay Johnson and with a major quarterback upgrade, DK Metcalf has shown us that upside. So no, I don't really.
Okay.
I almost wonder if it's worth making the first point on each of these receivers. Do they have the upside?
Great. Yeah, let's go through it. That's a great one. I'm going to put that in the notes here. Do they have the upside?
What is the upside?
Top 12?
Let's use the barometer I just gave, 15 plus PPR.
Okay, let me just see where that would have ranked last year. 15 points per game was wide receiver 19. That was Amari Cooper. He was at 15.1. So I think we got to bump it up more than that. I think it's got to be like top 12.
All right, so who was 12th? Do you have it in front of you, or do you need me to get
Tank Dell was 16.5. 12.
So Tank Dell, does he have the upside to do what he did last year?
No, but he's got Stephon Diggs there now, doesn't that cut into his upside?
I don't have Tank Dell as 12th in PPR points per game.
Where do you have him?
18th. He's exactly at 15 PPR points per game.
Tank Dell?
This is awesome.
Yes. Tank Dell.
So yes, I think that Tank Dell has the upside and DJ Moore has the upside.
Wait. Let's go one by one. Can they finish top 12? Let's just say that. Do they have top 12 upside? T. Higgins.
Top 12 defined as 16 PPR points per game?
No, that's one of the 12 highest scoring per game.
Yes.
How? See, Higgins has never shown that with Chase on the field.
If Burrow and Higgins stay healthy, then he has that kind of upside.
All right.
I don't
DJ Moore.
Yes. Absolutely
George
has.
Pickens.
Yes.
I hesitate a little to say yes, so I will not say yes.
DK Metcalf.
I hesitate too. I think it takes a little bit of projection for both Pickens and Metcalf.
I do think that, like, this is one of my problems with the upside discussion, is if you are talking about a player's upside, we should do some projection. And I think we're more willing to do that with guys that we like than with guys that we don't like. But I like it. When we're talking about, does he have the upside to do this? That shouldn't be what our expectation is for them.
Well, then in that case, every single one of these guys has the upside to do this.
I don't know that I believe that Christian Kirk does. Or Stephon Diggs.
I don't think DeVonta Smith does.
I would agree he probably doesn't if everybody else stays healthy.
Right. We need to remove what if somebody gets hurt idea from every single one of these equations, because it's obvious that if Dallas Goedert gets hurt, we talked about this on our last show, DeVonta Smith to the moon, he's going to easily make it. And if Jamar Chase gets hurt, then of course T. Higgins is going to see an uptick in workload.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's non-injury upside. Can they be top 12? We seem pretty on the fence with DK Metcalf. We're probably leaning no at DeVonta Smith. Christian Kirk, we're leaning no, right?
Yeah, yes. I think Heath nailed that one. I think that's an easy no.
I'm not even sure Christian Kirk has injury top 12 upside. Like he's the safe guy maybe in this group. I don't know if there's any scenario where he finishes top 12.
Yeah, he's a real safe wide receiver 3.
Tank Dell, non-injury, top 12 upside.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Calvin Ridley.
I think so.
I think so too.
Amari Cooper.
Yes.
Stephon Diggs.
No.
It's really hard. So this is the problem that I've got is that we're going to rank Nico Collins like he's going to make 16 PPR points per game. We just said Tank Dell has the upside to get there. How can you say that Stephon Diggs no longer has the upside to get to 16 PPR points per game when he was getting 20 plus years prior to 2023?
It's the years prior part for me.
Have you watched him? Do you think he slowed down last year?
I don't think Stephon Diggs is currently as good a wide receiver as Nico Collins or Tank Dell.
Okay.
And I think if the Bills thought he was, they wouldn't have traded him away.
Unless he was just such a problem off the field that they needed to move on, and they wouldn't have been the first team to have identified that. And then the Texans did their best to try and rectify that situation by appeasing him contractually. So I wonder if there's a little bit of that mixed in with Stephon Diggs. But I do not see Stephon Diggs going to Houston and sucking up 9 targets per game and leaving very little for Nico and Tank Dell. That would surprise me.
And I think that's the problem, I guess, is I can see Tank Dell or Nico Collins like not needing 150 targets to be. I could see them having one of those wild efficiency years where they're a top 12 wide receiver without 150 targets. I don't think Stephon Diggs is going to do that ever again.
I'm feeling you on that too, because I think Diggs' role changes. I've talked about this before in Houston. I think he's there to work the slot mostly, win on third downs, win in the middle of the field. Those types of receivers typically do not have a lot of explosive plays.
Yeah, he's actually been one of the few guys when I was doing my Drake London research. Stephon Diggs has been one of the few guys that has shown up as top 12 receiver with a pretty low yak per catch. He's one of the worst in terms of the guys that finishes top 12 consistently. Not as bad as Drake London, but a pretty low yak for Diggs.
Well, Drake London doesn't finish top 12.
Adam, that hasn't been just a 1-year thing?
No, it's been like 3 or 4 years, I think, in Buffalo. Yeah, I'm just saying, London's been even worse than Diggs, but not even close to top 12. It doesn't mean that Diggs isn't a great or wasn't a great player, wasn't an explosive player, just not a yak guy.
I think Diggs is more Deontay Johnson at this stage of his career, and there's not going to be the opportunity for Deontay Johnson type targets with both Collins and Dell there.
All right, I got to take
Deontay Johnson type targets. What number are you assigning for that?
10 a game.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
What I meant by that was he has to
get 10 a game.
Deontay Johnson's, when he's been a good fantasy wide receiver, it's been because of targets, not because of. Deontay. You don't think Deontay gets 10 a game?
No. I think those days are gone.
Okay. I got to take a break. And the thing about Diggs is it's probably going to come down to if you think he's washed up or not. You can make the case. I remember, I think I cited an article that was written on CBSSports.com saying why he's not washed up, but it was Joe Brady's offense that just didn't work for Stephon Diggs. And it's pretty obvious. I mean, his decline started when the coordinator change happened. I don't know if it was because of it, causation, correlation, all that stuff. Smarter people know how to say that better than I do. But
10.3 PPR points per game in 7 games with Joe Brady. And he still had over 8 targets per game.
Just the way he was used was different. The way the offense ran just didn't seem to fit his skill set, at least according to one very good article that I read on our website. Okay, we'll take a break, come back, and get into these guys a little bit more. We'll be right back on FFT.
An unsub, a seasoned one. And he's leaving a calling card.
How do we find a ghost? I have a plan.
In this range of 10 wide receivers, 20 through 29 on our consensus PPR rankings, Higgins, DJ Moore, Pickens, Metcalf, DeVonta Smith, Christian Kirk, Tank Dell, Calvin Ridley, Amari Cooper, Stephon Diggs. Should be noted, Higgins, I said, has that big gap in ADP. He's 29th in ADP. He's 20th in the rankings. DJ Moore is the first guy off the board in ADP, wide receiver 18. You might see him a little bit earlier than that in some other ADPs. Then DK Metcalf, then DeVonta Smith. They're 18, 19, and 21, respectively. I just want some names here, not analysis, because we're going to break down each player one by one. Who are, let's say, 2 or 3 of your favorites in this range, Heath?
T. Higgins, Calvin Ridley, DJ Moore.
Dave, favorites?
Moore, you already know, is going to be one of my favorites. I think DK Metcalf deserves some attention as being one of my favorites from the group. Pickens is probably third for me.
Okay. Who do you avoid, Dave?
Higgins and Diggs are probably the 2.
Heath?
DK and Diggs, I would say.
Okay. Yeah, look, if Diggs were going 29th, then you probably wouldn't avoid him. He's wide receiver 25 in our ADP. He is wide receiver 17 in NFC ADP, Stephon Diggs. So it's another group that's going to have some interchangeable parts. Let's start with T. Higgins. Start with him because he's the highest in our consensus rankings. He's the highest in our consensus rankings because Heath has him in the top 15. And oh boy, do I have an Azer stat for you, but I am not going to start with my thoughts on T. Higgins. We already heard he's one of your favorites, and he's one of the guys that Dave avoids. Although I would say at ADP, Dave would not be avoiding him at wide receiver 29. But go ahead, Heath, and make the case.
No, I think we should, like, this is arguably the most Azer statable player in the NFL. Like, between what's our sample size of T. Higgins playing more than half of the snaps and Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase? Like 8 games in his career?
No, it's more than that. And it was basically all of the 2021 season when he finished, I think, around wide receiver 15 or wide receiver 13 per game or something like that, which is the hope I have for T. Higgins. But over the last 2 seasons, T. Higgins has played fewer than 60% of the snaps in 7 games. And that's not even counting the games that he just flat out missed. Games that he started or played in, but played fewer than 60% of the snaps. 7 times for T. Higgins in the last 3 seasons. Last 3 seasons. I looked at the other wide receivers going in this range who have been in the league for 3 or more years and how many times they played 60% or fewer of the snaps. 7 times for Higgins. Cooper Kupp, 1. Terry McLaurin, 1. DeVonta Smith, 1. DK Metcalf, 1. Stephon Diggs, 1. Christian Kirk, 4, but kind of just 1 because the first 3 were the first 3 games of the 2021 season with Arizona. Then he became like a regular player, and then he got hurt with Jacksonville. My point is, like, Higgins, yeah, it's weird. You just don't get that many games. He's been a guy who's been in and out of the game. He's left a lot of games early with injury. He's played with a crappy Joe Burrow, and then when Burrow finally seemed to get right, Higgins was out of the lineup for some of those games last year. He's terrific when Jamar Chase is not there. There's been, I think, 5 games. He scored over 20 points in 3 of them. So you do have that injury upside. But I worry, Heath, that like it's easy for me to make the case he's a high-end number 2 receiver that just had like a bad year with Burrow last year, whatever. I worry that I'm sort of overlooking some of the negatives with him.
Well, yeah. No, I think that is... I've talked about this before. For the most part, I project players for 17 full games. I think like lately we've seen Keenan Allen struggle with some injuries, but early in his career, Allen had some injury problems and got that label and then had like a 5-year run where he was just healthy and one of the best wide receivers in football. I have not decided in my projections or rankings process that T. Higgins is an elevated injury risk. And so that is why I rank him. I think if you want to trust him as a healthy wide receiver with Joe Burrow in what we think is one of the best offenses in the NFL, you should rank him at the very worst as a top 20 guy. Yeah. It's just really, I think the discussion with Higgins comes down to how concerned are you about his injury history
and Burrow's, right? And Burrow's
right. Yeah. And I don't see really anybody discounting Burrow though,
or Chase. Right.
Yes. And so I do think like your tolerance for Higgins injury risk should determine how you rank him. I think the 29th wide receiver off the board by ADP is way too low. Even if you're scared of the injuries, You shouldn't have him that low.
Yeah.
Is he not just like a safe floor type of wide receiver?
No, he's the exact opposite so far because he doesn't. Who knows when he's playing?
Okay, so that makes him even worse than a safe floor receiver, which maybe means that the ADP is dead on with somebody like T. Higgins.
But the reason he's not just a safe floor wide receiver is he has enormous upside.
Yeah, but isn't that enormous upside tied to Jamar Chase? How
No,
many games does he have in his career where Jamar Chase has played and T. Higgins has had a monster stat line?
Well, I'm not the Azer statter, Dave, so I can't.
I can tell you. I mean,
how many games did Chase and Higgins play together last year?
A pretty good amount. I would say like 9 or 10.
But that includes games without Burrow.
Yeah. Okay. So this is what I put. Is he good with Jamar Chase? In 2021 and 2022, removing 3 games that T. Higgins left with injuries in 2022.
Okay.
Higgins played 23 games with Jamar Chase over those 2 seasons. In those 23 games, he scored 15 or more PPR fantasy points only 10 times. He scored 13 or more in 15 of 23 games. He averaged 15.7 PPR fantasy points per game in 2022 in games he played with Chase, removing the injury games. That would have made him wide receiver 13 per game. He also averaged exactly 15.7 PPR points per game in 2021, which made him wide receiver 13 per game. And that is always how I look at T. Higgins. I don't see huge upside with Chase on the field. I see a top 15 wide receiver when he is healthy and Burrow is healthy and Jamar Chase is healthy. But the fact that he's going wide receiver 29, I said to Dave before, he is one of my absolute favorite values in drafts right now.
So just looking at the game logs for last year, like one of the last games that he and Chase played together, he scored 22 PPR fantasy points.
So was that the Minnesota game?
That was the Minnesota game.
So what happened there? Jamar Chase got hurt in the 4th quarter, and after that, T. Higgins had like 30 yards and a touchdown in the 4th quarter and overtime of that game. He then followed that up with a huge game at Pittsburgh in Week 16.
Well, yes. Also, Week 2 last year, he scored 29 PPR fantasy points in a game that Jamar Chase played.
I'm just giving you the averages. He has not been an elite player with Chase.
No, we're not talking like you said he's been basically 15 fantasy points per game in 2021 and 2022.
15.7.
Right. So
Good.
that should have him above this group.
Yes, 100%.
He should be in the 10 to 19 range at that number.
So Dave, and I'm just going to say we can't talk about everyone as long as this, but since I think it was an interesting that you guys were so different on him, I think. Dave, why did you say Higgins is not one of your guys here?
Because I don't see that upside as a reason to draft him. Yes, it's possible that he can have some blow-up games with Jamar Chase, and it's definitely reasonable to say that if he's the number 1 receiver for Joe Burrow and maybe even for Jake Browning, that he can go out and put up 18, 20, 22 PPR points per game. But in a standard situation, the scenario that we're laying out where Burrow's okay, Chase is Chase, T. Higgins is the number 2 receiver there. He's probably right around 7 targets per game. His target per route run average 2 of the past 3 years has been 20.3% or lower. And I'm nervous about buying into T. Higgins too much just because of the upside when the downside last year was ugly. I think if you look at him and you say, okay, 13 PPR points per game without breaking a sweat, and we know what the upside is, and we know the downside is he could miss 2 or 3 games, or he could leave 2 or 3 games early with an injury. That could especially be the case this year when he's trying to get a bag. I think that's the safe way to look at T. Higgins. I don't think it's worth looking at T. Higgins as a top 20 wide receiver and saying, all right, this is a guy who can help me win most weeks. I think there are a lot of other receivers with a better case for that than T. Higgins.
Okay.
Yeah, I do think it really just comes down to how much you put into last year, because he was definitely a top 20 wide receiver with Chase the 2 years before last year, and then the Bengals were a disaster last year.
Where did he finish in PPR points per game? I know how many PPR points per game he had in 2022. It was 13.8.
I mean, this is the problem. This is the problem with that.
Oh,
he played 3 games where he barely, and this is why, like we were joking, if there are Azer stats that exist for anyone, it should be T. Higgins. In 2022, he played 3 games where he probably scored a combined, 8 points. And in those 3 games, he barely played. I'm sorry, his game log.
I remember one of those games. Yeah,
right.
but I think we knew before one of those games that he wasn't going to play a lot. The other two, it's the same. It's the trap that we talked about.
Okay, if you're going to say that the trap with Higgins is that he leaves games early, maybe. But what I'm saying is you can't look at his points per game that year because in week 1 he played 26% of the snaps. In week 2 he played. In week 5 he played 16% of the snaps. Did not get a target. And then in week 14 he played 1 snap.
1 snap. We knew he wasn't right going into that game. We told people to not start him.
Either way, it's not about that. It's about you look at his points per game. Those 3 games count. You have to remove them and remove whatever stats he had, which was a combined 2 catches for 27 yards in 3 games. You take those games away and only count the games he played with Jamar Chase that year, and he was at 15.7 points per game. That's my argument for T. Higgins, and that is a top 15 wide receiver. All right. We good?
Yeah,
DJ Moore after 10 minutes of T. Higgins. So nobody's taking DJ Moore at 21. He won't even be on the board here, guys. So, do you think, Heath, that it's justifiable to take DJ Moore as wide receiver 16, 17, 18?
Like I said at the beginning of the show, the difference for me between wide receiver 14 and wide receiver 29 is basically a point per game. So yes, I certainly think it's justifiable to like DJ Moore a little bit more than 3 or 4 guys that we have ahead of him. I have DJ Moore right now in my projections at wide receiver 21. It's one of the, obviously DJ Moore is a bit of a pain point for me, but he's one of the hardest. He should be a pain point for almost everyone. He's one of the most difficult wide receivers to understand. He went 4 years in the league where he never scored more than 4 touchdowns. Then he scored 7 in the worst season of his career. Thank you, Baker Mayfield. And then he just had an insane season and immediately saw his offensive coordinator replaced, his quarterback replaced, and one of the greatest target earners of the last decade added to the roster, and a rookie wide receiver added as a top 10 pick.
Piece of cake. Yeah. Dave, how about you? Do you think you could see yourself drafting DJ Moore as a top 18 wide receiver?
I'd do it. So yes. And it's because I buy into the DJ Moore that we saw last season. I think I worry. I've talked about this. I worry about the target volume staying where it was. He averaged 8.2 targets per game in 13 games with Justin Fields last year. I think that number can come down, but I don't think it's going to go down that much. I don't think it's going to fall below 7.5. And I think he's got explosiveness to his game. I think he can make plays after the catch. I think he can continue to be a red zone option for Chicago. And I think he's got a better quarterback to deal with. So I still view DJ Moore as not like what he was last year. I mean, he averaged 19 PPR points per game with Fields last year, and he finished with almost 17 over the course of the season. I would drop that 17 number a full point. I think he can get you to 16.
Does it bother anyone? Not saying it should. Does it bother anyone that DJ Moore had 6 games with 22.4 or more points last year? That's awesome. They were against one good defense, Atlanta. The other ones were Detroit twice, Minnesota, Washington, and Denver. At that point in the season, Denver was historically bad. So he just absolutely crushed these cupcakes. Does that bother anyone?
I love those kind of guys, but I think Dave's generally more averse to the boom bust wide receiver.
He wasn't. I don't want to put boom bust on him because he was just boom basically with Justin Fields, but he had these huge games against these awful teams. Oh.
Well, he still plays Detroit twice this year. He still plays Minnesota twice this year, and he plays the AFC South this year. I don't think the schedule is going to be something that really holds DJ Moore back. It's going to be the target volume that would hold him back, but I don't think it's going to hold him back that much. I don't think Keenan Allen still looks like a good NFL wide receiver. I don't think he gets 10 targets per game just because his name's Keenan Allen and he goes to Chicago. And I don't think Odunze is going to earn huge target volume either. I think Moore leads the team. I'm banking on DJ Moore leading the team in targets Therefore, he leads the team in catches, yards, and he'll compete to lead the team in touchdowns. He will be a good number 2 fantasy wide receiver.
Okay. George Pickens is next at 22 in our consensus rankings. Let me just check where he is in ADP. He's 26th in ADP. Dave, pros and cons for George Pickens?
We saw what he is capable of doing late last season. His final 3 games, this is with the quarterback change. Mason Rudolph went under center. There was one game where he had 0 fantasy points. He still averaged 18.6 PPR points in those final 3. That's with the donut. Averaged 7.5 targets per game in week 16 and week 17. Put to bed any questions about just what he's capable of doing as a number 1 wide receiver. So what's changed this year? Russell Wilson's going to be his quarterback. We can argue that that's an upgrade over Mason Rudolph, certainly over Kenny Pickett.
It is, yeah.
It's an enormous upgrade over Mason Rudolph. We're not going to argue that.
I don't think we should, but
okay,
we do need to discuss what the offensive coordinator change means, because Arthur Smith is a fantastic run game schemer. And I think Pittsburgh really wants to have a fantastic run game. And that could mean that the passing volume for George Pickens might not be as good as it was in those games, week 16 and 17. We just saw Drake London never get to 7 targets per game with Arthur Smith as his head coach and his play caller. And so that makes me a little bit nervous about George Pickens getting crazy volume. That's really where my argument probably ends for Pickens. I view him as a good number 2 wide receiver as well. I'd rather have DJ Moore. I think I'd rather have DK Metcalf because I'm a little optimistic about what's cooking in Seattle. But Pickens is an easy bet to lead the Steelers in targets for the 2nd year in a row and to put up good numbers, but break out and be a top 12 type of wide receiver. A little nervous to go that far.
I hear a lot about the LOL Arthur Smith anytime we get excited about any Steelers. I have no problem saying that Arthur Smith is also a big upgrade over Matt Canada. Like, I think this team threw 506 passes last year. We don't have to worry about them switching to a run-heavy approach. They were already there.
Yeah.
Okay. So then the change to Smith should mean that they are aiming to be more effective with their run game.
Right. No, right. Yes.
I think I don't know if I necessarily meant that Arthur Smith arriving means that they're going to run the ball even more than what they did last year. I just think that they want their identity to go back to being excellent at running the football, and Smith can help them get there. Listen, after Matt Canada got fired last year and they had different people with different duties making up the play calling in Pittsburgh, Pickens averaged 13.1 PPR points per game. That includes the 2 monster games at the end of the year. It includes the donut at the end of the year. I think that's a good floor for Pickens. And I think you can see more upside with him than you can with somebody like T. Higgins. That's why I'm taking Pickens out of Higgins.
Dave mentioned the way that George Pickens ended the season, but I think like any talk about what his potential is for this year has to talk about how he started the season, because he had 4 games without Deontay Johnson. He had 33 targets in those 4 games. If George Pickens comes out and averages 8 targets per game, holy cow.
He also had huge games against the Browns and the Ravens in that stretch. It was awesome.
He was awesome. He's a 23-year-old. He's a 3rd-year wide receiver who just got a big upgrade at quarterback, a big upgrade in my opinion, a big upgraded offensive coordinator, and saw a 10 target per game guy leave. Yeah. And like we're talking about these great improvements for Garrett Wilson and Drake London because of their quarterback upgrades, and rightly so. I think you can pretty easily make an argument. Don't talk about the way he started the year or the way he ended the year. George Pickens 2023 was certainly better than anything Drake London's ever done, with Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph throwing the ball.
That was a month and a half ago. I started out a show comparing 3 receivers blind, just here are some stats. And it was Garrett Wilson, Drake London, George Pickens. And London was the one who stood out as not having had done anything compared to the other 2 guys who have had an 1,100-yard season. And all 3 of them have dealt with terrible quarterback play. The Steelers have thrown 25 touchdown passes in the last 2 seasons combined. It's, Pickens had a 29% target share in those 4 games without Deontay Johnson, 26.4% target per route run rate. I hope, that would be amazing. When you compare him to Higgins, I think, Dave, you were saying he has a lot more upside than Higgins, right?
Definitely.
Does he have more downside than Higgins?
I'm going to say no. Nope.
I'm going to say yes. I don't think there's quite enough yet the thing is, like, you can take a little bit of a leap with Pickens. I love Pickens. I really want to get him because of the Deontay Johnson stuff that we just said. But like at the same time, he just hasn't, had so many bad games in his career. So many games where he's done like almost nothing. And it reminds me a little bit of Chase Claypool, except Pickens at least has had 2 years where he's been relevant. Claypool had a good rookie year, but it was very concentrated in a few games. Pickens has a little bit of that for me that scares me, guys. Like just too many terrible games for him. Doesn't seem to bother you, Heath?
No, that's why, like, I'm sitting here talking about, man, maybe I should have George Pickens ranked ahead of T. Higgins, and I'm not thinking about moving T. Higgins down. I'm thinking about moving George Pickens up.
So who would you be moving him over?
Because
I just moved Pickens over Higgins myself.
Yeah. Right now, I've got him behind Tank, behind Kirk, behind DJ Moore, behind Ayuk, Cooper, Debo. Like, those are the guys.
I'll take DJ Moore. I'll take Debo. I think I'll take Amari Cooper. Let's see if a holdout changes that. But I think he's in that range of solid floor, 13 PPR points, and yes, he can finish much better than that.
But I do already have George Pickens ahead of Drake London, so I don't have to move him ahead of him.
You don't have to do that.
All right, listen.
Our last 2 shows are making me question everything I know about Drake London.
No, I don't mean for it to be like that. When I compared them, I was really making it more about George Pickens, and like I don't really know why Pickens wasn't getting the same type of treatment as London and Wilson were.
He wasn't a first-round pick.
Yep, absolutely. He wasn't a first-round pick. He's a little bit of a boomer bust guy. His ADOT has been pretty damn high. I'd like to see it come down a little bit. I think it would help him be more consistent. That's what I worry about with Pickens. I worry about he's going to be like the new Tyler Lockett, which would be great over a full season, but could make you pull your hair out, several times.
The other reason why is, and I'll own this, most people think that Russell Wilson's positive stats last year were fraudulent, and he's absolutely terrible. And that Aaron Rodgers and Kirk Cousins coming off of Achilles injuries are much safer bets as quarterbacks than Wilson is.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right. All right. Sorry.
There's definitely that opinion out there.
We're going to change the show a little bit today, guys. We'll do the first 5 today and the next 5 on Monday. So that leaves us with DK Metcalf and DeVonta Smith to talk about after this commercial break. We'll be right back. We are
An unsub. A seasoned one. And he's leaving a calling card.
How do we find a ghost? I have a plan.
Got the old fooled you there from Schaefer. Didn't know if we were going to a commercial or not. All right, we're back. So far, we've talked about Higgins, DJ Moore, and Pickens. How do you rank just those 3, Dave?
Moore, Pickens, Higgins, and I just want to add this little nugget if I can. Pickens' 2 best games from last year, when they were, it was late in the season, were 2 of his 3 best ADOT games of the year, or highest ADOT games. I don't know if higher means better. 17.8 or more yards of an ADOT for Pickens in those games.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I just think that's, if he has that kind of ADOT, which is anything over 14,
yeah,
you're probably talking about an inconsistent player. My guess.
He averaged 28 yards after catch per reception against Cincinnati in his breakout game. Those games typically don't exist.
Yeah, but he's capable of it. That's a difference between.
Yeah.
Not to belabor the point. The difference between him and London is Pickens has showed that ability to make those plays every now and then. All right. Sorry.
What do you think Drake London's career high single game yak per reception average is? I'm going to look it up.
I thought it was going to be total yak, and I thought it was going to be below 28.
It might be.
I'll guess in the 18 range, but who knows?
Okay.
It only takes one play.
We're the only nerds that care about this, so let's just move on.
DK Metcalf checks in at number 23 in our consensus rankings and 19th in ADP on CBS. So the people like Metcalf a little bit more than we do. And I think, Heath, when you look at Metcalf, you have to ask yourself the question. In 2020, he was the number 6 wide receiver overall, number 9 per game, 7th in non-PPR per game, 8th in half PPR, 9th in full PPR per game, 83 catches, 1,300 yards, 10 touchdowns. In the last 3 years, that was 2020. The last 3 years, DK Metcalf has been 22nd to 23rd per game every single year in PPR. So is that just who he is, or is there more there for DK Metcalf? Give me your thoughts on him.
I'm the low guy on DK Metcalf, but I've always been the biggest believer in Tyler Lockett, and I don't think he's going away. I do think there's a threat that JSN and the new offense sees a larger role. And I'm not sure he only hurts Lockett in that situation. Also, I'm not optimistic really about Geno Smith or the Seahawks passing game. So I think if you draft DK Metcalf as a number 3 wide receiver, you've really left yourself some room for him to make you happy. I think if you draft DK Metcalf as a top 20 wide receiver, as Dave talks about so often, we don't want to draft these guys at their upside. And I don't necessarily mean that I think that's DK Metcalf's upside as a player, but on a roster with Geno Smith, Tyler Lockett, and JSN, I think wide receiver 19 is pretty close to his upside.
I tend to agree, and I am excited about this Seattle offense because of what it means to the wide receivers. And first start with just the talk that the wide receivers are going to get a lot of targets. That's been the track record for Ryan Grubb. It seems like the obvious thing for Seattle to do. Yes, even with Geno Smith or Sam Howell under center, I just think that that's where they're going to go. The strength of that offense is in their receiving core. It's deep, it's good, it's strong. DK Metcalf has been a monster end zone target earner every year of his career. I don't think that that's going to change. What I do think will change is where DK Metcalf lines up. And we've heard this out of Seattle, that they want to use their wide receivers. They want to mix and match it a little bit more. I still think JSN is going to lead the way in terms of lining up in the slot. He's going to do that the most, but DK will get down there too. And if they can create a matchup and manipulate it with DK Metcalf against a smaller slot corner, I would imagine that Seattle will ride that as long as the defense lets them. And I think that DK Metcalf has a chance to have a floor of 14 PPR points per game. And that's not crazy. That's where he's been before. And so his ceiling, it can be high. We know he can score a lot of touchdowns. Hopefully the target volume goes up to the point where he leads the team there. He was close last year. This year, maybe he takes over because Tyler Lockett takes a step back. I'm excited about DK Metcalf, relatively speaking. I've got him ranked 21st among wide receivers. And I think if you draft him, we're talking mid-round 4. I don't think that's too close to his ceiling. I think that's all right.
I was really surprised when I just saw this, and so I'm going to say it. George Pickens had 1,140 receiving yards last year.
Mm-hmm.
That would be the second best total of DK Metcalf's career and better than any of his last 3 seasons.
Now,
Dave, do you think that when you mentioned the targets, do you think that Lockett's targets go down by more than JSN's go up?
Give me the numbers for them last year, if you have them.
Lockett had 122 and JSN had 93, and Metcalf had 119 in one fewer game than Lockett.
I'm going to say that Lockett finishes 3rd in targets in Seattle this year. JSN will be 2nd. DK will be 1st. I think the gap will be wider between JSN and Lockett than it will be between Metcalf and JSN. I think they really like JSN and expect him to be a much bigger contributor this year.
So Lockett had 122 last year. Does he have 100 this year?
No.
Less than 100.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, can I just bring up one other thing here? Like, they were last in plays last year. Right? We talked about this on our previous show an hour and a half ago. this could help. If you compare 2020 when Metcalf was a stud to 2023, he ran 86 fewer routes. So, I can't figure out why they've been a fast-paced offense that has been last in plays in 2 of the last 3 seasons, but I'm hoping that they just run more plays and that there are just more pass attempts or something like that.
I definitely have them projected to run more plays. I think what you need to do to be a believer in DK Metcalf is to agree with Dave that Tyler Lockett, this is the year that he just goes from target leader to 5 targets per game.
Yeah. 32 years old in September, Tyler Lockett, and coming off by his standards, a pretty bad season.
Because I have him at 103 targets.
Where do you have the others?
I have Metcalf at 125.
Yeah,
that's higher than I thought you'd have him.
That's pretty much what he did last year. 119 in 16 games. He was on pace for 126 targets last year.
So I basically have the JSN bump. That was the reason I asked the question. Is I basically have the JSN bump in targets replacing the Lockett loss in targets.
Right.
I don't have any of those Lockett targets that are going away, going to DK. I have them going to JSN.
All right, let's talk about. So then if to sum up DK Metcalf, it doesn't sound like you guys think there's a ton of upside there. But the fact that he has finished 23rd or 22nd per game 3 straight years, you'd have to say he's got a pretty decent floor.
Yep.
I think that's right. And there's upside that I'm not if the new offense in Seattle just takes off and is super fast paced, then that's where the upside would come from Metcalf. If they go run 1,100 plays this year, they ran 995 last year, right, then there is certainly more upside for DK. And
there's more room for all the receivers to have good target volume from game to game.
All right, last guy we'll talk about today.
That actually might be the very best point of all. Heath coming through at the buzzer. If Seattle just runs more plays, which I think they're going to do, it's going to lift the target numbers for all 3 of the receivers.
Yeah, I mean, you could give Heath credit for that, sure. I also said it at the 2-minute warning. Yeah, but that's okay. That's DeVonta Smith.
Heath, that was a really good point. Just one more time. Excellent.
I didn't give the 1100 versus 990, whatever you said. That was interesting.
Once again, I think Heath proves that he's the genius behind this program.
That's
great or late.
All right, DeVonta Smith. If you missed the Wednesday show, I said that over the last 2 seasons, when Dallas Goedert, DeVonta Smith, and AJ Brown have been on the field, DeVonta Smith, the points per game he's averaged would have made him wide receiver 24 last year. If you take away 2 Minshew games in there and make it Hurts, Goddard, Brown, DeVonta Smith, now we're talking about wide receiver 36 per game. Overall, because Dallas Goedert has missed time each of the last 2 years, DeVonta Smith has been, I think, 16th per game in 2022 and 20th per game in 2023. What you love about him is that when one of the guys is out, and AJ Brown missed the playoff game and DeVonta Smith had a huge game, 110 yards or something, he's fantastic, So at least you see that when he gets targeted, he does a lot with it. But at the end of the day, are we only hoping for an injury here to make it?
The other thing, and I don't know how likely this is because Jalen Hurts is a very unique quarterback amongst franchise quarterbacks. But Kellen Moore has been an extremely pass-heavy coordinator. The Eagles have not been a very pass-heavy offense, and that is an understatement. And so I don't think we should expect Moore to all of a sudden have Jalen Hurts throwing 650 passes like he did with Justin Herbert and Dak Prescott. But I don't think it would be that surprising if they throw 50 more passes than they have in the past. And then that would open up more room for Smith to be good with Brown and Goddard.
For the second year in a row, I've got Smith and Higgins kind of tied together, where I think they're basically the same type of receiver as far as fantasy profile goes, where They've got some good safety from week to week, and you know where the upside is. But I think DeVonta Smith is just more explosive of a receiver, where he can have a game where Dallas Goedert plays and still put up some good numbers on occasion. So I like Smith better than Higgins in that regard, but I think he's another one of these guys that you look at and say, all right, 13 PPR points per game with Gus up to 16, 17, and he'll have some duds mixed in as well.
If I was going to make the case for Higgins over Smith, I would say that I see the comparisons, and Smith is probably a more explosive player. But Joe Burrow in 2022 was on pace for 4,755 yards and 37 touchdowns. In 2021, he also played 16 games that year. He was on pace for 4,899 yards and 36 touchdowns.
Yeah,
those are numbers
can't touch that.
Yeah, he can't touch those. And you've got the Goddard factor. And with the weird thing is, like, I keep saying it, and I don't even really necessarily. I mean, I do believe it, but it doesn't make sense to me. Like, Dallas Goedert really shouldn't be, in my opinion, affecting DeVonta Smith that much, but it is happening. I mean, it does happen.
Well,
Goddard is Goddard is Goddard at the Lockett stage of his career where we could see him get phased out, but the difference would be there's no JSN to replace.
I don't think it has anything to do with that. I think it has to do with offensive philosophy change.
But when he goes out, they don't throw to the tight end. Like it's. Okay,
I think they may not throw to the tight end as much when he's in now, is what I'm saying, because I think Kellen Moore just may have more targets going to wide receivers.
That helps DeVonta Smith. No. What would hurt DeVonta Smith, and Heath, you talked about how Kellen Moore has this great track record with wide receivers and leaning on them. Philadelphia upgraded to Saquon Barkley. I can't imagine they're going to just be the same with their running back usage as what like the Chargers were last year, as a very bad example. Like, Kellen Moore is going to take advantage of having Saquon Barkley.
Yeah,
I don't get excited to draft DeVonta Smith. Do you guys get excited to draft him?
I'm more excited to draft him than T. Higgins, but I'd rather have Pickens. I'd rather have Metcalf. But it's kind of close between those three.
This is probably a Giants stat and not a Saquon Barkley stat, but I need to at least say it, because if you'll remember, I kind of hammered Ramondre Stevenson going into last year about how no running back has seen as many targets as him and been below 5 yards per target and continued to receive that many targets. Saquon Barkley the last 3 seasons been 4.6, 4.4, 4.7 yards per target. 6 is about average. It's probably just because the Giants, but Jalen Hurts has never had success really throwing to his running backs in terms of efficiency. That's not been like Jalen Hurts dumping off passes has not been. I'm not sure that throwing the ball to Saquon Barkley is going to be a good thing for the Eagles offense or something they do a lot.
No, but handing off to him might be something they do more than they have done with their running backs in the past.
It might be.
Would you take DeVonta Smith or DK Metcalf?
Here's how I have it in my rankings. Starting at 21. Metcalf, Amari Cooper, George Pickens, DeVonta Smith.
I am taking Smith over Metcalf, but I'm the low guy on Metcalf.
Okay. It's interesting. It's like, if you buy into, like I said, DK Metcalf, wide receiver, 22 or 23 per game, 3 straight seasons. And Smith being basically wide receiver 24 per game when he's been with Goddard, but worse than that when it's been Hurts. He had 2 huge games with Minshew. And I kind of feel like it's an easier path to upside for Smith. He only needs one guy to get hurt, whereas JS. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. Like maybe DK only needs one to get hurt.
Maybe, but I could also see Smith eating into AJ Brown's ridiculous target share from last year, because in the second half of 2022, he had more targets than AJ Brown, and in the postseason run, the Super Bowl run, they had the same amount of targets. That's why people were so excited about DeVonta Smith going into last year. And then when the game started being played, AJ Brown had a ridiculous target share. DeVonta Smith really suffered. There's no reason why that can't be a little bit more even,
Yeah.
But Moore could be construed as a play caller who can make that happen, because
I think DeVonta Smith I think I'm on Smith over Metcalf. This
When did
conversation.
CD Lamb's target explosion happen? It was when Kellen Moore left.
After the bye, yeah.
Yeah. So what? Who
Keenan
would that?
Allen did have a target explosion, even for him, last season with Kellen Moore.
Without Kellen Moore. Oh,
With.
Keenan Allen did?
Keenan Allen did.
Keenan Allen had it the year before too.
13 targets per game.
I don't know about that, but like crazy numbers 2 years in a row.
When Mike Williams went down, the Chargers offense became throw it to Keenan Allen and then throw it to Keenan Allen. Oh yeah, we have Eckler when he's healthy. Oh look, there's Keenan Allen. He's open again. Throw it to him.
That's by necessity, though, right?
Still,
he averaged
who knows to lean on his playmakers, and you'd be hard pressed to not call DeVonta Smith a playmaker.
Philosophically, I don't really say the play caller leans on his playmakers. I think it's really the quarterback making these decisions.
Who do you think the plays are designed for? Plays are designed for the quarterback to throw to.
Well, I get that, but it's the quarterback who's ultimately deciding who he's throwing to.
It is certainly a combination.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. I mean,
some quarterbacks go to their first read more often than others.
That's true. That's true.
That first read is usually the player that the coach wants it to be.
Yeah, but we'll see. I mean, when has Kellen Moore had? I guess he did with Cooper and this is the best wide receiver duo that he has had, because when he had Cooper and Lamb,
okay,
I would say it would be early in Lamb's career. There was a year that Prescott got hurt. Right? Would you agree with that?
I think so.
I think AJ and DeVonta versus Lamb and Cooper is it's really I wouldn't make a strong argument for either one.
The Eagles receivers now are better than the Cowboys receivers then.
When will then be now? Soon. All right, that's it. By the way, another show that I didn't watch so I could watch that super boring episode of The Bear was Giants Hard Knocks, which debuted on Tuesday night, I believe. I didn't see it.
Oh, you haven't seen it?
No, I haven't. Have you?
No.
I saw the clip of the seed being planted on the Brian Burns trade.
Yeah. Dan Morgan wanted 2 firsts.
I saw the clip of them trying to get out of the 6th pick before they settled for Malik Neighbors.
Yeah.
Trying to get out of the 6th pick?
Yes.
That happened too.
In that same clip with Dan Morgan, you're saying?
I believe so.
It was on the sideline with what's his name?
With Brandon Beane and Dan Morgan asking if they want to move up to 6, and both of them were like,
it was let's just see
where capital to do that.
It's the same thing with Dan Morgan trying to get 2 first round. He never thought he was going to get 2 first round picks for Brian Burns at that point.
No, but planting the seed nonetheless.
Oh, is today Tom Cruise's birthday? Someone asked me if I wished Tom Cruise a happy birthday. Oh yeah, happy birthday, Tom Cruise. Star of stars. All right, we're out of here. Sorry, this is airing on July 5th. I hope you had a great July 4th, everybody. Mine was exceptional. We'll talk to you on Monday with the rest of this mid-round wide receiver discussion. See you later.